This is Eric Rutan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
G'day everybody, I hope you are well. Thank you so much for joining me, proving that the unlikely can occasionally become a reality. I bring to you a conversation featuring the great Steve Harris from Iron Maiden and British Lion. Now the catalyst for the chat with Steve is twofold. One, Iron Maiden are touring Australia across September, and the other reason, his other band, British Lion, the hard-driving pub rock outfit, are playing club shows in between those enormous Iron Maiden spectacles. Now, throughout this conversation here, of course, it's an opportunity to discuss British Lion, Iron Maiden, and bass playing, but regular listeners to the show will know I dive a lot deeper. So it was an opportunity to gain Steve's thoughts on the Mandrake project. That's Bruce's new musical vehicle, whether or not he's looked into trying out status basses, those outstanding graphite basses from Colchester in England. What was the secret sauce that kept him going through the 1990s and beyond? Blaze. Are there any contemporary artists out there that Steve feels he'd enjoy collaborating with? Yes, he answers it all and then some in this conversation. Now I'm going to do some thank yous because they're long overdue, it must be said, in the outro. I won't do them in the intro, but do stick around, especially you long-time listeners, because I've got a message for you in the outro. So let's get stuck into it. A chat with the great Steve Harris from Iron Maiden and British Lion.
What state are you representing, mate?
Gold Coast, Queensland.
Brilliant. Lovely. All right, mate, I'll pass you over to Steve. Thank you.
Thanks, brother. No worries.
Hello, mate. You all right?
G'day, Steve. How's things treating you so far in Perth there?
Yeah, good. Weather's pretty rubbish, but it's just like being in England.
Yes, yeah. I thought you might have been over there to, of course, I know the answer's you're not, but the Wallabies game's happening as we speak against the Springboks, so I thought you might have been taking in a bit of that.
No, I didn't even know it was on, to be honest. No one told me about it.
There you go. Yeah, rightio. Yeah. Mate, I'll just get this out of the way before I, start asking you questions, but I'll never forget back in 1992 as a young fella, I went to a boarding school, so all my mates lived across regional Australia and in the bush, and I was on a coach going out to the middle of nowhere, wherever that might have been, and I was had a burgeoning interest in the bass guitar, courtesy of you and Billy Gould of Faith No More. But I remember reading Bass Player magazine at the time, and you were talking about, they were asking you questions, and it was an editorial about Fear of the Dark, and it was one of those compelling events that's always been in my mind about why I'm still a bass guitarist to this day. I play most weekends, and it was a really important moment, if you like, because I didn't have much else to do but to read and reread that magazine, and I must have read your article, a dozen times or so, mate. So I know you probably hear these sort of things all the time, mate, but from one bass player to another, thank you very much for doing what you've done.
Oh, cheers, mate. Appreciate it.
Mate, British Lion, it's a more straightforward iteration of Iron Maiden, would you agree?
I think it's pretty different. It's more rock than metal, but I think we've got good songs. We're a good live band. It's just a different thing, really. But I think it's a good live band. I think people should check it out and just and they can make their own idea up when they come and see us. But I think they won't be disappointed.
Yeah. Does it? I'm intrigued by the lyrical themes. Actually, is that you or your singer that's writing a lot of the lyrics there?
It's Richard that's writing the stuff. He's basically him and David Elkins and Graham Leslie to a certain degree with the earlier stuff. They were driving the stuff. Well, they still are driving the stuff really. And Richie writes the lyrics. He writes more from the heart, more personal type stuff. He's very strong lyricist. So I tend to let him get on with it, really.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is more personal. I could hear that. And Father Lucifer in particular is an amazing song. Now, is that the sort of song that you ever think about writing for Maiden?
Not really. I don't really mix, across the two. So that's why the thing is, when other people, like, if they're coming up with the ideas, which they generally do drive the stuff in British Lion, then obviously that's something that wouldn't ever see the light of day in Maiden if it's written by, it's the same thing with anybody in Maiden. If anyone outside was to write with them, it wouldn't be a Maiden song. So it's just a different way of writing, really. I suppose it's a lot more straightforward, rock rather than metal. There's plenty of melody there, as is, plenty of melody in Maiden too. But I suppose there are bound to be some similarities, but I think it's quite a different band, really.
Yeah, what lessons have you learnt from British Lion? What you're doing with British Lion that you've applied with your work that you've applied to your work in Maiden?
Well, I try to separate the two as much as I can, really, so that I don't really apply either one thing and the other. I don't cross over anything with either band, really. It's just it's its own different thing. So I don't really sort of think about it like that. It's just it's a different approach with different people, and so different writing styles.
Yeah. What are your impressions of the Mandrake project?
Well, I went to see Bruce in London. Yeah, I thought it was really strong live. But funny enough, the personal favourite of that night was actually a really old song. Tears of the Dragon. I thought was just fantastic. But it's got some really good elements on it. It's pretty different. It's different to some of his other albums he's done, but it's good different. So yeah, It was a good live show.
Yeah, have you heard much of what Adrian's doing with Richie Kotzen?
Yeah, it's more sort of rock and blues based, sort of more American style, really. So he's got some good. Again, it's good songwriting, good playing, but it's more rock and blues than I would sort of want to do myself. But it's still good stuff.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. What about? I opened up the top with a statement about bass playing, and you must be aware of this, that we as bass players revere the work that you've done. So what unconventional? I think the key word here is unconventional advice would you give to young bassists that are trying to find their sound in a very saturated music scene?
What I just say to people is listen to as many people as possible, and don't try and stylize yourself on one person, because a lot of people say to me, "Oh, I want to play just like you." And I say, "No, you shouldn't do that. You should just listen to lots of different people and just get your own. Come up with your. You'll eventually, hopefully, you'll come up with your own style and sound, rather than just being. Otherwise, you're just going to get people to say, "Oh, you just sound like someone else."
Yeah. Well, what about for you as a songwriter? Has there ever been a compelling event or a specific moment within your life that you feel fundamentally shaped your identity as a songwriter, maybe early on?
Not really. I mean, I've never really analysed it like that or thought about it like that. Just write as I feel at the time. That's why any album that we do, Maiden or whatever, it's just a statement of where you are at that point in time. And so I don't tend to look back on it and analyse it or anything like that. It's only when you sort of do interviews like this that you sort of start thinking about stuff like that, really. And when you're doing new stuff, you just do stuff that you think is, feels right. It sounds very fundamental, but that's how it is, really. You don't want to be sort of trying too hard to not repeat yourself or repeat yourself. You just write with feel and just write whatever you think is best at the time. So it's tough. It's hard to explain, I think, to anyone who has maybe not written a song yet or has only written one or two songs, perhaps. But obviously, Maiden's been around a long time, so. And all the different experiences that you experience and everything, all that goes into elements of how you write and where you are at any particular time.
Excuse the hubris for a moment, but you've written some of the most important and critically acclaimed heavy metal ever. If you could choose a song from your catalogue that you believe encapsulates your legacy as a musician, do you think you could do that?
That's an hard one because there's so many songs I've written. I don't know how many I've written, but it's got to be more than 150 songs at least over the years. So it's a really tough one to say. I don't know. I think it's probably something you probably would maybe ask the fans. But then, I think when you ask people, we'd never really do that. But if you did ask people, I think you'd probably get, 10 or 12 the people saying 10 or 12 different songs. It's just such a personalised thing. So it's very difficult. But I suppose I probably would just pick a long song that's got loads of stuff in it and say, well, that's maybe fairly representative. But there's not really only one particular song I could say is totally representative of what Maiden is or what he is, my version of Maiden is. Of my songs, so it's just tough.
If someone had to pick one, just say I was in charge of, sending they send the music out into deep space, hoping aliens find it, all that stuff that's been going on now for a little bit. I'd pick Flight of Icarus. That'd be my choice. What would you think if someone was to choose that as the song that encapsulates everything Iron Maiden is about? You reckon that's a fair representation?
Not really, because it's like I think it would be better to choose a song that's written by, say, three of us or whatever, because that song was written by Adrian and Bruce, so it doesn't really have the elements my writing in there. So I would probably pick something like, I don't know, Evil That Men Do, which is written by all three of us. We're the main songwriters. I mean, Davey does write too, but he's not very prolific, so it's difficult. And Nico doesn't write. Yannick joined a lot later, but he's become quite a prolific writer later. But I would say probably something like Evil That Men Do, really. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm more thinking too about the bass line in that song of, I've never heard anybody get it the way you get it. And it's that slide right up to the higher notes there. It's nobody else could have written that song except for you. That bass line, except for you.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing. If someone else has written a song, like if Adrian and Bruce write a song, for example, and I'm not involved in that song, like writing-wise, then I still have to put a bass line to it, and it might be something interesting that I wouldn't normally have come up with because I didn't come up with the idea in the first place. So from that perspective, it could be quite different.
Thinking of a song like The Evil That Men Do, then it's almost quasi-spiritual and political in a way. So how do you feel when you look back over your catalogue, the different themes across all these wonderful albums and across the decades too? That's the key point. How do you think that they've reflected the social and political climate of the times that they were written?
Well, we've never been a political band, so we've never really written about politics. We've never really been interested in writing about that stuff. We've always tried to just write stuff and do stuff that's been, I suppose, more of a release in a way for people to come and have a good time rather than be thinking about politics. But I suppose, you are, sort of governed by, some sort of influences of what's going on around you to a certain degree. So, it's I mean, there's bound to be some sort of reflection in what's going on.
Yeah. Your music is you and Metallica and Celtic Frost actually are the three bands that are continuously influential. There's always bands that I get in my mailbox that sound like you and the other two bands. Hundreds of releases come in a week, and it's just that influence is just pervasive. So are there any contemporary artists or bands with whom you'd like to collaborate and that you're drawn to their music? And as I say, the key word here is contemporary, so stuff that's come out in the last decade or so.
I wouldn't have the time to collaborate with anyone. It's time's taken up with two bands, let alone doing anything else. It's funny because David Hawkins, the guitar player at Bridgeline, he said to me 3 or 4 years ago, he goes, I'd love to do a prog album with you. And I went, mate, I said, mate, when are you going to fit that in,
Yep.
So, the likelihood of that is pretty slim, I think.
We wait for that one then. That'd be unreal, yeah. What about
fan interactions. So you're meeting fans all the time, and you can see how important it is to them when they meet you. So has there been like one or a standout moment or interaction with a fan that's left a lasting impression on you?
We've been going so long at Maiden, almost 50 years now. So it's a hell of a long time, a hell of a lot of fans that we've met. And there's been so many, good moments of meeting people and from all different walks of life too. So I couldn't really pick one thing, really, if I'm honest. It's just been loads of people and some very, very interesting people too. But my word of advice, if anyone wants to, break the ice or just relax or whatever, just talk about football. And just start off with that, and that'll be a good start.
Indeed, yeah. Do you follow rugby and cricket at all?
A little bit of cricket, not rugby really. It was a long shaped ball for me, I'm afraid. But I did play rugby at school when I was pretty young, but I was never really, big enough, meaty enough to sort of. I was quick, but not broad enough to participate really too well. But I didn't really get bitten by the bug with that. But I played a bit of cricket. I like cricket. I prefer the one-day cricket rather than test matches, to be honest. But my favourite's always been football.
Yeah,
and tennis as well, really. But
what are your thoughts on the Indian Premier League and the pervasiveness of the T20 matches?
Well, I mean, Premier League is it's probably, I suppose I'm biased, but I think it's probably the best league in the world now. Has been for some time. So it's the toughest league because really, literally, a team from the bottom can still beat a top team from the top. So not like a lot of the other leagues where it's just governed by the top 3 or 4 sides. Anyone can beat anyone. So, but as far as cricket goes, I mean, I haven't really kept up with cricket as much as I would have liked over the years, really. So I can't really comment too much about that. But
yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Look, the mid-90s were tough for metal, no doubt. And I've talked a lot about it on the show and even written about it. And look, you have an enormous fan base even back then across Eastern Europe and Germany, South America, these places that helped sustain the band. But I distinctly recall a proposed tour of Australia back in 95 and 96, I think it was, and it had Maiden, a band as big as Maiden, playing in clubs a similar size to what British Lion are playing in now. And I know that's intentional, the British Lion side of things, but still it was just where metal was at. You had the diehards, the people like me that were still turning up. But what about the lessons that you and Rod learnt through that period? Were there any specific lessons that really helped you sustain the band in the long term?
Well, I just think the reactions back then, I think, were just even more intense because it was the totally, the real hardcore loyal fans that were still there. And helped us through tough times. So it was quite challenging, but I like it. I like a challenge. Like I like a challenge with British Lion, for example.
Yeah.
Trying to play, you're coming in and playing to an audience where you don't know. You got to just test the water, put your toes in the water, and just see. You don't even know how many people you're worth in a particular country if you've never played it before. So it's a challenge. And I like that.
Yeah. Do you get people turning up and do they get what it's all about, which is you're playing hard rock, pub style music, and Maiden isn't a feature in that?
Yeah, I think there's an excitement about people coming along for the first time and checking something out and not really, some people might have, really been a big fan of the albums or whatever, still not seen us live, so there's an excitement about that. But even for people that come along a bit on the fence a bit and think, I'm just going to check it out and see what they're like, not really been knowing us that well, mostly it's been really, ultra positive. People have been, loving it and just really surprised, how good the band is live.
Yeah, Yeah, I can't wait to see you guys. Actually, I'll be at the Triffid you're playing in Brisbane. Actually, so I'll be at both shows. Of course, I will be. But I'm actually equally as looking forward to watching British Lion as I am Maiden. I've got to say.
Well, that's good because it's going to be a good night both nights, in different ways.
Indeed, yeah. Hey, I've just got a couple more questions for you, but look, I've always wanted to ask you this question because I did stay with the band through the Blaze period, and I like the work that you did with Blaze, in particular on the X Factor. But I've never seen anybody ask you this question, so here it is: did you think about tuning down half a step or even a step when you played with Blaze to accommodate his voice? Was that ever a conversation?
Not really, no. Maybe on some things in retrospect we could have done, but no, we didn't really think about it. It was, it wasn't really till we got out and played live that we realised it was a couple of things. But the weird thing is that he was really confident when we were rehearsing, and then a couple of times on a couple of songs, then we get out live and there was maybe an issue or two here and there, but in general, he handled it really well. But it is what it is. I suppose if in retrospect you can do all kinds of things, but Blaze, he helped keep the band alive through that period, so we owe him a lot.
Yeah. What was, I know you've been asked a bunch of questions, or I assume you have been asked a bunch of questions about the recent, when I say reunion, the catch-up that you did with Paul, but what was that experience like?
Well, obviously to bump in a Paul, a lot after a long time, it's just, it's like meeting any of the ex-band members, whatever. It's just, it's nice, still keep in touch with most of them. Paul, was a West Ham, or still is a West Ham supporter, so every now and again we'll text each other about football, so we kind of kept in touch a little bit over the years like that. But yeah, it's just nice to see him, and just hope he's going to be okay, with his health. That's the main worry,
Yeah, no, I hear. I play Status Bass, which are made there in Colchester near you. Do you know Rob and Dawn at all, who own that business, Status Basses?
No, I don't. I don't know.
You know the basses though that I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. But maybe Graham Leslie might know him because he lives in Colchester or near Colchester. So he might know him. I don't know. I'll have to ask him.
Yeah. Oh, I know you're a long time Fender user, but and I know you've used some other brands very early on, but love to see you use a Status. I've got to say, just that graphite sound, I think, would give just what is already there, but enhance it somewhat. I'm sure Rob would lend you one. Put it that way.
Yeah, I think maybe check one out. But I must admit, I'm happy, with the guitars I use already. To be honest, it sort of does what it says on the tin, type of thing. So I've tried lots of different guitars over the years, but I just always loved the Fender Fender Precision. So I've tried different ones. I've tried the Jazz, and I tried loads of basses over the years, and they're all got their own elements and good things about them. It's not like whatever, but I think you just have to find your own thing, really. And the position just always felt right for me.
Yeah, I think Fender owe you a great deal of gratitude, to be frank. I don't know how many P basses have been sold because you play them. I mean, there'd be tons, literally.
Well, it works both ways. I mean, it's been a fantastic instrument for me. So, it's the same thing with the strings. Wrote the sound of strings. I mean, they've been really good to me, and so without them, it would have been tough for me. So, it works both ways.
Yeah. What just on the bass front? How I know you're playing with Clear Audio and these other, the point is world-class PA systems and the like. So is amplification, I'm talking about your back line, is that even important these days?
Yeah, of course it is. Just, you've got to be able to hear what you want to hear on stage. So, yeah, it's ultra important, and whatever's going through the mics is coming from your, DI and speakers as well. But so it's important. But, and with British Lion, I can't take all my gear, a specific gear with me everywhere. I mean, I can when I'm in Europe or UK with this because you can transport it okay. But places further afield like this is a lot more difficult. And the speakers that I use is pretty specific speakers, the EV speakers, so you can't get them everywhere. So obviously, like in Perth, for example, the gear would already be there, and I should be able to use my EV speakers at British Line. But with some of the gigs, if the gear can't get there in time, then I might not be able to use it. I'll have to use something else. And so that's where the Tech 21 that I use comes in handy, because it simulates my speaker sounds just unbelievable. And I'm not sounding like a salesman here. It's just, it really does. It's the first thing I've ever had, really, that's been able to simulate my sound as close as possible through, any type of speaker. And I tried it one time through my mate's speakers, which was totally and utterly different sound than mine, and it's probably as far away from my sound as possible. And I put the Tech 21 on it, and it miraculously sounded very similar to what I wanted it to sound like. So I couldn't believe it, really, when the guy turned up with the prototype, and it just was like, wow, this is unbelievable. Something actually does what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, technology is actually doing what technology is meant to do. There you go.
I know, yeah.
Yeah. Look,
scary stuff.
Yeah. Look, I asked the question because we're fairly used to, it might just be a Brisbane thing, that we're fairly used to bands coming through and they don't have the full back line because, to your point, it's hard to bring things from Europe or the United States. So they're really just going direct in some cases. I've seen a couple of gigs like that. So, but I know for your quality of work and your standing in the industry, those EV speakers, I've read a little bit about the ones that you're using. Yeah, they're. I don't even think they're available to the average punter like me, actually. So
yeah, well, I think it's getting a little better and a little easier to get them in some places, but the Tech 21 is just my backup thing. So, and it works very, very well, very close. So. I shouldn't say that, should I? Because it's about something's going to go wrong.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Do you have to bring backups for backups, like 3 of them or 4 of them, just in case?
Yeah, I have carry one with me, and there's 2 or 3 others, and so keep them in all different places in case something goes wrong or whatever. So yeah, it's just I'm always like that anyway. I mean, I'm in the studio. I always make sure there's backups of everything in different places. In case a building burns down or something like that. I'm just paranoid about stuff like that. Kind of horror stories about people losing their master tapes and all sorts. And so
I remember talking.
I back it. I just have I back up the backups.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to say, I remember just quick story. I remember talking to Bob Daisley a couple of decades back, and he was saying his bases are housed in a castle surrounded by a moat. So that must be similar for you as well, I take it.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Yes. You have a heck of a story unlike really any other out there in metal. And there has been a lot of books written, but there's been none written by you. So please tell me a biography. I know there's a lot of the story that's still to go, but we'd love to read about your thoughts on your own life. So have you got plans for that?
I'd love to do a book at some point. It's just I know how much work would have to go into it to do once, and at that time. So it's just that's the problem. I've written a few forwards for other people's books, and even doing those it takes time. So I thought, wow, if it takes that much time to just do a forward, then what's it going to be like doing a book? But I'm sure I'll do one at some point.
Mate, thank you so much. It's a tremendous privilege to finally talk to you, and it's just one of those moments. And I know you get a lot of that sort of feedback, but thank you very much for making the music that you made, and long may you continue to make tremendous rock and roll.
Cheers, mate. Appreciate it. Cheers.
Thanks, brother. Cheers.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, mate.
Appreciate it. Cheers, mate.
Catch you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
What do you think? I imagine that a lot of people that have listened up to this point, it may be your first interaction with the show. So I appreciate that a big name like Steve Harris has brought you here. So I hope the conversation lived up to expectations. And if you like what I do, there are many more chats over at scarsandguitars.com. Now, before I bid you farewell, I just want to go through some thank yous. I've been doing this show for it's over 7 years now. And in that time, there's been one figure that has been a constant presence, and his name is Brother John. I won't mention his surname because people in the industry in Australia know who he is. And so, in other words, those who know. But for everybody else, this is a bloke that facilitates the majority, the introductions, I should say, to the majority of the people that appear on the show. Without him, this show simply doesn't happen. It's too hard to get introductions as a nobody. Way too hard. Anybody that's tried to start a podcast and gain access to high profile people will be able to tell you that you need a gatekeeper to advocate on your behalf. And he has done that ever since I started this back in 2017. So, John, love you, mate. Thank you very much for your help and support throughout the years. And also, importantly, you as the listener. If you're a long time listener, and there's a fair few of you out there because I've been communicating with you over the years, if you've been listening through that entire time, well, this is for you. This episode is all about you. Okay. I do this not because I want to broadcast into a vacuum. I do this. It's hard to say if I do this anyway, because I think these conversations need to find an audience. I certainly would have the conversations, and they might be a bit different, but the way in which I construct them is certainly to be as interesting as possible from the listener's perspective. So again, I hope I've achieved that there for the long time listener, and for everybody else that's new. Like I said in the introduction to this outro, I hope it lived up to your expectations. All right, that's all from me. My name's Andrew Mackay Smith, and I'm the host of Scars and Guitars. Until the next one, it's a goodbye for now.